Alright, hey guys, welcome back to Internet Tomato, where we will be diving into the dark, twisted, and epic lore of Tainted Grail. I shall be your guide to unraveling the mysteries of Avalon. Today, we are continuing our lore series by going over Arthur's reign in Camelot. This video intends to be a balance for new players and fans alike, ensuring everyone walks away with more knowledge. Keep in mind that the lore is still developing, as Tainted Grail has games planned for the future to supplement what we know, and things are somewhat subject to change. In this video, spoilers are sprinkled throughout, so watch at your own risk if you want to experience the story for yourself. Also, if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe, or you might just get turned into a men here. So, let's get into this. Last we left off, we discussed Uther's reign and his relationship with Arthur. From our Discord, which I'd love for you guys to join if you're interested in participating in polls, talking about Tainted Grail, or just this channel in general, I asked about your guys' thoughts on whether Uther and Arthur knew each other. It appears most of you think Arthur was under Uther's tutelage for a time before Arthur took the throne. I do agree, but I think Tainted Grail has left it open just enough to go either way if they decide to in the future. At the beginning of Arthur's reign, the kingdom of Camlann was teetering on the edge of either annihilation or collapse. The Picts destabilized the region with their barbaric warring culture to the north. They routinely raided the scattered petty kingdoms and performed bloody and disturbing sacrifices to their goddess. They had never invaded England, but those bordering the Picts were deathly afraid of these cultists. In Old Britain, the other tribes and cults brought regular turmoil and required nightly quests to subvert. Beasts prowled, portals opened, and villages were sacked. Along the shores, sailors disappeared, and ports would be seized by a mysterious race of giants, likely originating from Old Ireland. The Druids further fanned the flames as they tried to control the mysterious magic of the gods and goddesses of the homelands. Though they sometimes sought to do good, they produced far more problems than solutions. Uther, and later Arthur, tried to stabilize the region. Seeing evil, needless destruction, and a demand for leadership, the Pendragons stepped up. Merlin was likely the first ally of Uther. He was an inquisitive, ambitious, and brilliant wizard with strong ties to the Druids. The difference between wizard and druid in Merlin's case is gray. As though he was called a wizard, all of his apprentices were druids. Through daring quests, diplomacy, and skirmishes, Camlann became a beacon to the homelands. Knights flocked from the region to join Camlann's court. Uther left Arthur a kingdom far stronger than any in Old Britain, but they were not secure by any means. King Arthur was young when he was named king. His legacy would eventually dwarf his father's, but initially, Uther's boots seemed too big to fill. Arthur continued the projects Uther had begun and saw many of Uther's dreams come to fruition. Arthur's chief advisors at the time were his diplomatic mother Igraine, possibly his jealous half-brother Sir Kay, his foster father Ector, and the godlike wizard Merlin. The Round Table is generally attributed to Arthur, but only a few of the future Knights of the Round Table would have been present. King Arthur was famed for his nobility and unmatched humility, being labeled the Fisher King by many since he didn't enjoy the spotlight. He had been known to slip away during great feasts and events. He would be found near a river, fishing in the peace and quiet. Though proud of the Pendragon name, loyalty was something Arthur detested, and the burden of his kingship weighed heavily on his shoulders. He had a strong sense of duty to the people of Camlann, and would risk his life if it meant saving lives. The nobility in Arthur's eyes were meant to serve the people, and not the other way around. Though Arthur led by example, few were as selfless as the king. He was willing to die 1,000 deaths if it meant fulfilling his duty. Few saw things the way he did, but even his enemies generally would admit Arthur was noble, decent, and self-sacrificing. Whether during Arthur's reign or the end of his father Uther's, Camlann had an extraordinary wonder, the waterworks. Camlann had a self-operating forge. Constant rumbling, with some more distinctive thumps and screeches, reverberates around you as huge wheels slowly revolve around rusted shafts and spin countless smaller gears and screws. Wooden and iron hammers, some of them the size of a horse, incessantly beat empty anvils. All the machinery is powered by the water flowing through the river, which you can see far below the wall. Water wheels also power an abandoned yet tireless forge, where bellows with ruined bags move up and down. Camlann created a self-operating forge. Not only that, but they had even invented automatons, robot-like creations. Many of these were used as vendors in Old Camlann, capable of basic tasks. Camlann was a marvel. Likely attributed to Merlin, these technological advancements gave them an edge over their competition. The marauding Picts were repelled, and Camlann became a superpower in the region. Arthur's extraordinary character and the success of Camlann were a magnet to the greatest knights of Britain. I do not know their order in terms of who joined first to last, and for Ector, I'm uncertain if he ever stepped foot on Avalon. I will provide a list of the named knights in Tainted Grail, but there are likely others. The knights of Arthur's court were Lancelot, Percival, Palamedes, Galahad, Gawain, Bedivere, Lamorak, Geraint, Bors, Agravain, Gaheris, Peleus, Gareth, Caradoc, Tristan, Dagonet, Kay, and Mordred. This is 18 in total. Two notable knights I left out were Yvain and Ector. While Ector may have passed away before the Round Table's official founding, Yvain's knighthood I may go into detail about in a future video, going over the factions of Avalon, but there are some discrepancies. Who entered the Round Table when is hard to tell. Some would have been near the start of his reign, such as Tristan and Kay, while most others would have been added near the end. Camlann had an era of triumphs after the Round Table and Merlin played their part. Traders and adventurers from around the homelands heard of the extraordinary kingdom. With many of the petty kingdoms allied, Arthur felt like there would be order. It is likely during this time that he married his wife with the intention of continuing the Pendragon line. The queen is never mentioned by name and is only referenced once by Arthur when he says that the Allmother did not bless them with children. Since in traditional lore his wife is Guinevere, I will call her Guinevere for now. With only the occasional druid meddling in magic and causing havoc, no crisis felt too difficult for his legendary knights and standing army. Around the time of Uther's death, even Morgane joined the court with her son, Sir Mordred, and likely her grandchildren. Morgane was at least 65 at this point. I say this because in the next 15 years, she had a great-grandson, Gaheris, who joined the Round Table. However, Morgane was an annoyance to her brother. She experimented in arcane arts, summoned demons, and caused damage all throughout Camelot with her many failed experiments. Despite her shortcomings, she did provide value. She invented the arc lamp, which was a lantern fueled by magic. In her study, she also deciphered ancient Fomorian tablets. The revelations in these tablets fueled her experiments and fascinations. I will say that it is possible that she ought to be credited for the automaton's invention, but it isn't mentioned anywhere in the lore. I only suggest this because the Foredwellers also had automatons, and since the Fomorians fought them in the Last Age, perhaps the knowledge of creating automatons had been transferred through the tablet's writings. Just a thought, it could be wrong. The Fomorians, as discussed previously, were a militaristic aquatic race of giants. They generally didn't spend much time on land if they could help it, as the sea was their home. Whether before, during, or after the discoveries made with Morgaine's Fomorian tablets, the Fomorians entered the scene. There is no lore on their relationship to Arthur, but the giants likely were sea raiders and slavers with small footholds on the shore as forward operating bases. This was a crisis for the king, but it is unknown how Arthur handled it. He, through negotiation or might, pushed the Fomorians away from Camlann and ended up having a tentative peace. They made little contact with those in Camlann, but had interactions with other factions in Old Britain. The next crisis was the Picts. Morgaine discovered, through her ventures, that the Picts were amassing an army. She returned to Camlann to warn her brother, but Arthur, fed up with her nonsense, did not heed her warnings. The Picts assaulted Camlann and much of Britain. It was a brutal war and required the king's personal intervention. Many of the other kingdoms suffered and required protection. Countless refugees sought safety behind Camlann's walls. While away in war, Arthur left Camlann to a trusted knight and Queen Guinevere to manage in his stead. The knight and Guinevere fell in love, and they cheated on the king. After the long-fought war, Arthur returned and discovered the betrayal. An enraged Arthur, sword in hand, lashing out with anger at one of Arthur's knights, surprised by the king's sudden appearance, holds in his arms a flushed, brown-haired maiden. The traditional story is that the knight is Lancelot, but he is not given a name in Tainted Grail. The queen is never mentioned again in the story, but there is one character coming up in a future video who may be her, so don't forget her quite yet. In traditional lore, she becomes a nun after Arthur's death, but since Arthur doesn't die and she isn't mentioned again in Tainted Grail, perhaps she's forced to become a prioress as recompense for her sins. Camlann entered an era of relative peace. Camelot had been fully built, and the Round Table reached its height. Arthur's court grew, and eventually included people from all over the homelands. Arthur, Kay, and Morgaine's mother passed away, though, likely around this time. Before she died, she made Morgaine promise to take care of her younger brother, but Morgaine was not the best at keeping her promises. Despite the loss, the king's advisors grew in number. One of Arthur's favorites was royal geographer Iriu. She was a famous explorer who was attributed with many of the maps of Camlann and loved adventure. Arthur adored hearing of the distant places, and wayfarers would pique his interest. One man, a librarian from Alexandria, or real-world Alexandria, was permitted to sit with the king and tell tales of his home. Arthur was just, and in the librarian's recounting, a strange call compelled him to seek out everything obscure and distant. Even in his late 40s, Arthur remained bright-eyed and fascinated by the world. He never stopped being that boy who would ask for every curious tale before slinking away when things were too crowded to appear and go fishing until dark. The following explanation is my best guess to sort out the conflicting details where the RPG and board games disagree. On a fateful day, Merlin in his tower heard word of a war. The Fomorians used a biological weapon to kill off another race of giants called the Furbolgs. The Fomorians were safe to use this disease as sea creatures had a natural immunity. Merlin left Camlann to learn more about this disease. In his investigation, he discovered a bizarre man who claimed to have traveled back in time to the homelands, and this man, by the name of Didurga, brought a mysterious disease with him. Merlin purchased the sample and returned to Camlann to study it in his lab. Upon his return, Arthur and the Round Table were made aware of the threat. With a race of giants nearly exterminated by the disease, Merlin bringing a sample of it to Camlann was extremely controversial. It was needlessly dangerous, but Arthur was able to calm most of the knights. He had the utmost faith in Merlin's capabilities, and was convinced that Merlin, with enough time, could discover a cure to this dreadful disease before the Fomorians attempted to use it on humanity next. The main dissenter was Sir Mordred, son of Morgaine. He demanded immediate action to prepare humanity for such a terrifying plague. Arthur and the Round Table downplayed the risks, trusting in Merlin and believing the plague wouldn't be detrimental. In a rage, Arthur's nephew slammed his fist on the Round Table, shattering a chunk of the stone slab. Mordred swayed a few at the Round Table, and they defied the king. They left Camelot to prepare Camlann for a dreadful pandemic. And this is also likely when Morgaine abandoned Camelot as well to guide her son. Eventually, Arthur heard something in the night. An apparition, a pale lady with 4 arms, called to him. Through imagery and emotion, she cried out to Arthur, claiming they knew each other in a past life. She seemed heartbroken and just wanted to see if he was okay. Arthur was confused, and though she looked alien, she was familiar. That very night, after Merlin had finished his experiments for the day, his test subjects, rats, escaped. They entered the sewers beneath Camelot and made their way to Camlann. The Red Death Plague began. The following day, Arthur told the Round Table about his dream and the Pale Lady. They were skeptical of the mysterious 4-armed being and began to wonder if Mordred had a point. As the days passed and the visions grew more urgent from the Pale Lady, the Red Death grew virulent as well. It almost seemed linked, the Pale Lady's heartbreak and the severity of the Red Death. The disease spread like wildfire, and in a matter of days, Arthur and the Round Table realized how devastating the Red Death would become. Perhaps Mordred was right after all. Despite the urgency for a cure, Morgaine refused to return to the court, as she believed her ingenuity was best served in Camlann and away from Merlin, as they no longer saw eye to eye. In distress, Merlin and his apprentices frantically worked on a cure, while Morgaine organized the Red Church to fight the disease in the streets. Morgaine experimented on the victims, trying desperately to create a cure as well. The disease spread exponentially. This was no ordinary sickness, and the concern of it wiping out everyone, down to the last child, was a genuine possibility. Not just in Camlann, but all across the homelands, they dealt with the disease. Rapidly, the dead piled up as those with the disease either died from the organ failure or turned into ravenous husks, desperate to kill anyone not infected with the Red Death. The death toll was so high that the dead had to be thrown into the moat surrounding Camelot. Thousands upon thousands of bodies filled the moat to the brim, and Arthur was desperate. As all hope was lost, Arthur had another dream of the Pale Lady. All this time, she was urging the king to meet her, to see her, pleading and begging in wailful tears. With Merlin's help in interpreting, Arthur realized what she was trying to convey. The disease originally sprouted from the crippled heart of a grief-torn mother. She couldn't explain the details, and she barely understood it either, but only if she could reunite with Arthur could the Red Death end. Having a description of Avalon and the weirdness, Merlin considered her words and determined that what she was proposing could be possible. Likely out of complete despair in their dying world of the homelands, Arthur decided to put his faith in the Pale Lady. The great nation of Camlann would make its evacuation to Avalon. In the next episode, we will dive into the Exodus and the beginning days of humanity on Avalon. But for now, please like, subscribe, and join our Discord for random polls and Tainted Grail chats. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a great day. I really hope to see you guys in the next one. I appreciate you all. I love you all. I don't always say this, but make sure to tell the people who you love that you love them while we have the time to do so. And anyways, I hope to see you guys in the next one. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.